One of the great things we can do in our garden is actually design it or build it to try and encourage wildlife to come into the garden. I can hear some right now. But wildlife is just not big animals and birds. Wildlife starts from our insects, and actually the health of your garden can be judged by the amount of fauna and flora in your garden, if you like. So bringing wildlife starts with the insects, into the birds, butterflies, and then hopefully some larger animals as well. And there's a whole range of things that we can do to help the wildlife. Probably the most important thing is having lots of habitat for them and lots of biodiversity, which means flowering plants from all around the world, not just Australian plants. What's really important to create habitat is that we have plants that have sort of shrubby structures so the little birds can get in there and feel protected, or some of our possums can create nests there. The other important thing is to have a layer of plant material, all the layers of plant material, trees, shrubs, ground covers and climbers, because it all creates diversity and habitat. One of the most important single features we can bring to our garden to encourage wildlife is actually water. Now I've got a little pond here, and that's quite a lovely little domestic pond, but even a bowl of water is quite important. Birds, all sorts of animals are drawn to it, and they just love it. It also gives us the advantage of being able to have fish in the pond as well. The important thing is if we are going to attract wildlife through water, while animals will come to drink from it, it's important that we put water plants in that garden as well, so that we develop the insect life and we try to create an ecosystem within the water. And that is what we're trying to do in our whole garden, is to actually look at the whole ecosystem, and that will really bring wildlife into your garden. It's really important with insects to try and cover the ground. So you can do this with your plant material, but it's really important to have leaf litter, sticks and bits of bark in there, because they are all little micro elements of habitat. So if we have a little look under this ground cover, that's like a green mulch. And it's really important that you can cover your soil, because all these little animals love protection. So if we go in and have a little look in here, I mean, there's just probably a whole world of little microbes down there. I'm not sure if we can see any, but you get this lovely leaf litter, and that's so important for attracting insects into our garden. Another thing we can do to attract wildlife to our gardens is just have loose materials lying around the ground. Something like this log with all its fissures and little areas actually is great habitat for slaters, centipedes, earwigs, you name it. They are perfect habitat areas. So it's great to have these in your garden. The other thing that's really important is to use a lot of leaf litter and have things just lying around. So even this sort of material, if you dig around, it's actually going to have worms in it and a range of that micro fauna that is so important for the wildlife in our gardens. Some people think you've got to have native plants to get native birds in. It's actually not true. And in fact, some of our exotic species bring birds, frogs, all sorts of things in. And this is an amazing plant. This is a bromeliad. And the bromeliad is basically an epiphytic plant, which means it doesn't gain its water from the ground. And this plant gets its water from rain, which is captured in this great vase. And these are fantastic habitat for our tree frog. This is a Camellia sasanqua, and this plant and Camellia japonica are great bird attracting plants. And just like the last plant we showed, they're not a native plant, and it's an exotic plant. But honeyeaters go mad for this flower. You can see them actually hanging off it, and the plant will be bending down as they're sticking their beak in there and actually trying to get the nectar out. Again, with wildlife, they love flowering plants, particularly birds. And these aloes, Aloe arborescens, are just full of nectar. And actually what's quite interesting, they're flowering at a time of the year where not much else is flowering. So birds just go for these very, very quickly. So while it's great to use a whole range of plants, it is also a great idea to use some of our native plants. And these can be native shrubs, or they can be actually indigenous plants that would have grown on the site before white man came. And birds would have naturally, and animals would have naturally fed on those plants. But this is a wonderful plant for habitat. This is Acacia cognata, one of our small wattles, and there is great bird habitat and animal habitat here. So it really, a shrub with this sort of structure gives those little animals great protection. So this is a wonderful asset to our garden. So when you think about your garden, it's really wonderful if you can actually create some habitat and wild spaces for nature. And if you create these places, you'll not only create homes for them, you'll actually connect yourself to nature.